or something? Are we blasting off or what?
We're live.
actually
5
live.
seconds.
I'm not going
Okay,
to
we're
play
live.
Oh, we're
And-
live. Oh, I thought we had a countdown for 5 seconds. I'm sorry.
it.
Sorry.
We're on live now.
Yes,
Yes.
we are,
Live.
Greg. We're all set. Here we
You're
go.
live. You're live on Bigfoot of the Bunny. You're live.
Oh, we need you.
In living color. In living color. Yeah,
Dark
live.
Horse Paranormal.
that's right.
Yeah,
Thank
we're Dark
you.
Horse Paranormal tonight.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mysteriously, somehow we turn into Bigfoot and the Bunny on Saturdays. I don't know how that works.
And the bunny, not in the bunny people.
Oh, yeah.
A short-lived, is that what you said, Greg?
We got a turtle with us tonight too,
Oh,
Oh.
nice.
Oh.
Nice. Turtle.
in case you need to have some help.
No,
Somebody.
they're my favorite. Oh, they're my favorite animals. Honest to God.
Sea turtles.
Just sit
Well,
off.
he's got little antenna on him.
Oh, he's cute.
Nice. Yeah, Kristen is taking
Don't
care
ask me why I got that.
the rings that hold up a six-pack. You know, the little plastic
Yes,
that the sea turtles choke on. She's now chopping those up, which I think is pretty good advice out there.
for soda, not beer. Just
For I see some people are now joining.
Just-
Welcome to the Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast, Part 2.
part two.
Part 2.
Part deux.
Yeah.
Part
Duh.
Duh. Some people say duh.
I'm not a crook either. No. Never been a crook. I've never been a crook.
Ever cook.
Never.
All right.
So we were talking about tulpas, egregores, servitors, and Michael, I think you started to tell us about the Peril experiment.
Yes, please.
And maybe we just recap on that story.
Now,
We'll go from there.
yeah, well, let me go back to the Philip experiment just real quick. The Philip experiment was done with a group of people that developed a whole list of attributes for this person.
Correct.
And they gave it, each one of them gave it something. Okay, one person gave a description, another person gave him his speech, his IQ, his knowledge, a lot of backstory, all this other stuff.
We're actually reading some of that list before
Yes.
you joined.
Right.
We got into
Yeah.
that.
Now, Bill Murphy, he was the host, one of the guest stars on Fact and Fiction, who
Mhm.
claims to have a lot of knowledge with this, went to Ventura, California, to a hotel that is there. And a year prior from me being there, because he had a conference at that same hotel, a year prior, at another conference that he had there, he did the Pearl experiment, where they had a round table and different paranormal investigators and a couple of psychics, and they put together Pearl.
Which is Peril, correct?
Right, Pearl. Yeah, it was like the name Pearl,
Mhm.
and that was just a name they gave her. Now yeah, go ahead, Greg.
No, I was just commenting on
Okay.
the person that jumped up.
Yeah,
from
I'm
Georgia
sorry.
I'm
Paranormal.
just throwing up some of the comments that are coming in, but you go on.
And so they did this like little, I don't know, seance or whatever, but they had every member at the round table create an attribute for Pearl. And they said, oh, she lived in the 1880s or the 1800s, and she wore these dresses, and she was a maiden, and she came from a wealthy family, and they gave her this Victorian look, I guess.
And
These
like a backstory.
Yeah.
Mm.
As a backstory. Anyway, so what they did was they created this thing, and then they never shut it down. They just let it go.
No expiration date.
None. And
Seems
they didn't take any responsibility for it. Okay. They went around with their equipment and they actually could notice it because it's a thought form. It looks very similar to an orb or very similar to a ghost, in effect.
Mhm.
And so they were walking around and they were saying, oh, it's here. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, by the end of the weekend, I guess their fascination got really bored because they just let it go. No responsibility, no caretaking mindset.
No respect. Like they
No,
didn't
no.
or
It was like, let's just see if we can duplicate this and then we'll go about our merry way.
not right.
And Bill, who claims to be a lot of into the quantum effects of the paranormal. And he actually, at the conference, did a quantum experiment. The whole idea was that when I pressed him on the pearl, he didn't want to talk about it. He just said, no, I don't want to talk about it. Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to talk about it. And so I found it. And how I found it was two ways. Dowsing was the first way. And the second way was my video equipment. So I actually videotaped this thing. And it looked like a common orb, but it had holes in it.
All right.
And you could tell it's not a functioning thing. It just like it had dementia. It was
Like
just
a blob of energy, and it just
right. It wasn't even a globule. It wasn't even like it had a it wasn't like it had an ectoplasm or anything. It was just like a holy Swiss cheese orb. The best way I can describe it.
So interesting.
Okay, so I go to Bill's manager, I guess, of the event, and I said, I just saw, or just found this pearl that he keeps talking about, that he's so proud of the creating of it. But I said, but it's getting like dementia. And these guys that were staying in this one hotel with this one room kept saying that it sounded like there was an old lady in their apartment, in their room, bumping into stuff.
right. So this is one of the ways you kind of thought it was going crazy.
Yeah, and they thought it was a real.
How did you know? Like it was just kind of losing its shit.
Yeah.
For,
Okay, so that's okay. It's okay. I'm going to lose mine pretty soon. So I'm running the edge there. Okay, so I have my dowsing rods, and I have some.
I'll send you a link, Nathaniel. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I have some very good. At that time, I had some very good, great guides. They're spiritual guides. They weren't really angelic, but they're pretty high up in the rank. 15 is the highest level of a guide, and mine were about like a 12. They were juiced. Okay, so I asked them. I said, is this thing going to hurt somebody? Is this dangerous to have this thing wander around this hotel? And they said, oh yeah, it's dangerous. I said, well, has anybody tried to shut it down or modified it to make it whole? No, they said, no. I said, okay. I said, what would it take to shut it down? Just blow it apart, because it's just thoughts. It doesn't have a soul. It's not really real. It's just a form of energy. Now, we've talked about how the universe becomes compliant to your will. Okay. And this is a way that it becomes compliant. So it's a thought form. It has no spiritual attributes. It is not even a real thing. It's not even a real thing. So I asked my guides to find some good angels and come down and just get rid of it. Just blow it apart, get rid of it. And they did. The angels came down and just dissolved it. Okay. Well, I go to Bill Murphy's assistant manager there of the conference, and I just told him, I said, I'm sorry, I found Pearl, and and she was destroyed. She was just blown apart by my guides and a couple of angels. And I said, didn't Bill ever think about
Doing that?
Yeah. And he goes, no. He goes, last year we were right here in this very room, which is the main area of the hotel, and that's where they did it. And it stayed there in that hotel because it was afraid to leave. And like I said, a lot of people who stayed at that hotel, my God, they were frightened of this thing. And I just told them, I said, okay, Pearl's been dissolved. Go tell Bill and never do that again. I don't want to hear him doing this again in his bedroom. You know what I'm saying? Never do this again. He was just not prepared to do something like this. So he goes, well, how did you get rid of it? And I said, well, I asked my guides, and my guides probably got some angels and took care of it. And he goes, you can do that? I said, Hell, man, I'm a paranormal investigator. I can do anything, man. I mean, once you get into the paranormal, what you're dealing with is a lot of dysfunctional spirits and entities. Their dysfunction is that they're afraid to move on. Or
Yeah, that is often quoted cited as a
Yeah.
reason for earthbound spirits, right? When people use that,
earthbound spirit. Now, okay, now
they're talking about some that are maybe a fear of judgment, a fear of letting go of something that's here. Hey, Taryn.
Hi, Taryn.
How you doing? What's up? What's up, Howie? Howard Petrie is
So
joined.
would you describe it as an animated thought form?
Yes, that's all it is. It is just a thought form. Now, now we've done this test, and it goes with voodoo, voodoo, power of prayer, hypnagogic states. Okay, and I can put out a thought right out of my head. I can just pull it right out of my head and send it to somebody, like love, okay, or hate. And that thought form will mill around till it finds whoever it is, and it will attach to that person. And that is the beginning of what we call shamanism. In essence, it's the ability of a person to transmit a thought to something or someone, and there's a direct effect, whether the person knows it or not. There is a physical effect.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. You
most
know,
definitely.
Michael, actually, a few weeks ago, we had a gentleman on. I think his name is Todd Wilcox. He had a book, Slipstream Shaman, and I had this thought kind of epiphany while talking to him that was related, and it was about like all of our thoughts and intents and emotions. Spirits a lot of times seem to communicate in emotional ways. That seems to be the communication itself is, an expression of pain, sorrow, loss, whatever it is. The imagery a psychic gets a lot of times is just like sort of the pictures, if you will,
Right.
of those things. And it got us wondering, like, maybe when we have these, like a really negative thought that was powerful, a really positive thought, that maybe it just doesn't end with the person in that moment, that the thought lives on and maybe takes on a life of its own or has a way of collecting with other ones. And maybe that's responsible for some of the hauntings or even, demonic or angelic presences that we see.
This gets better. Okay. Now, when we
I'm sorry, I'm going to 1 second because Mr. Nathaniel Gillis is joining us as well. Let me bring him into the stream.
There you go.
What's up? What's up, Michael Lynch, my man?
Hey,
how are you?
Mr. Gillis.
Mr.
Greg,
Gillis.
how are you doing, brother? I'm here to learn and listen, man. I'm here to learn and listen, so keep on going, man. I don't want to interrupt the flow.
My head's ready to explode already.
Yes.
Taryn, to your question, we
Yes.
started with the Philip experiment, which I suspect you are probably familiar with, went into Tulpas, and we are just letting this thing roll. So this is part 2. New link.
Do it.
Lots
What's
of
my favorite? Do it.
I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, what the deal is getting back to your Tulpa idea. Okay. If I can imagine a thing. Okay. Now, Nathaniel down here can tell me it's all demonic. Okay. But if I can imagine a tulpa, okay, or a puka, or let's say tulpa, let's not get into pukas. But anyway, let's get into tulpas. Okay. Several people have written books that they've actually created them and they've just appeared, but they had in their mind an original concept, a pattern for that tulpa to take. Like my son, let's say, has died, and I'm going to recreate my son, and the tulpa is the spitting image of my son. Okay. So that's the whole idea. If we can imagine it, we can create it, and the universe becomes compliant because we give it our will. Now, when we die, what is read? Our last will and testament. And the will means do it, or I will come back, to make sure it's done. The will of the individual is translated even after death into legality and legalese, legal forms. So their will continues, okay? And it is our will and imagination and creativity that is poured into these thoughts that actually the universe becomes compliant and then creates it. So, like Nathaniel down there, I can create a demon. Okay, just work with me. Theoretically, hypothetically, what everyone.
I'm going to go around because this is.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know, Sharon, one of our listeners, she needs you to slow down because she's writing everything down.
Okay.
If you go too fast,
That's a good thing.
There's books out there. There are books out there about a woman went to Tibet, learned some shamanic ways, created a tulpa that actually turned on her. Okay. Another gentleman who gave a lecture at that conference said that he met a tulpa. The tulpa never slept and never ate, but it looked and was as real as you or I. And he never spoke. He never spoke. So he never slept, he never ate, he never spoke. But he could understand. Yeah. So
well, here's a question. Let's go around with this. Getting back to the tulpa. All right. The idea here is that it is created by a person. Somehow they are putting out enough energy, emotion, magic, sorcery, whatever it is, into this being, and it comes to life. Do we think, and I want to go around to everybody, that it is a consciousness in and of its own, a consciousness that already existed that's now inhabiting something that you created?
It's something
or it's a part of ourselves, our own.
It's part of ourselves. It's an extension of our own self.
Right.
And we give it that energy. We give it that. Our will becomes its life. Its life force. But at the same time, if we don't take care of it, if we don't nurture it and take care of it, it will develop a certain amount of intelligence. It won't become sentient, but it will develop its own intelligence. So let's say I don't like somebody, and I say, okay, the old saying, here's the old saying, it is the monkey on your back. And what is that? That is supposed to be an addiction, right? But what if it is somebody creating a little demon to you and sitting on your back?
That's a good point.
That is a good point.
Thoughts, guys? Greg, thoughts on that?
That's
Chime
good.
I I'm just amazed by it. I know that, when we put thoughts into it, we fuel it. And the more we think about it, the more we fuel it. So we're going to go ahead and almost come to the point of creating something that would be almost like atomic if we put enough thought into it. And that's the problem where I think I agree with the doctor that it can become dangerous.
Yeah. Okay.
Lars says archons. Nathaniel, thoughts?
Go. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a deep subject, man. I think again the fact that is that again you can believe creates, right? Belief creates, and if you're literally, I don't know. So I do believe obviously that there are certain entities that will use the mortal portal to come into existence. But it's always the age-old question though with idolatry, especially in the ancient Near East. They would go and make idols, and they would make the image of the idol. So where did that image come from? That entity or the mind? And then once the idol was created, that consciousness or something would step into it, stretch itself into the image. And so I think that there is an innate relationship that is built, and I think that's what the doc here is covering pretty well, man. And I don't believe they're all demons.
No. So I can send you positive energy as well as negative energy. And the only thing about this whole thing is that the universe doesn't really understand it, but it's compliant. So if I hate, okay, if you have two teams, red and white or black and white or whatever, like checkers or chess. If you have two teams, then one team must defeat the other. There has to be a winner, no matter what you think. But during the game, your strategy is to defeat your opponent. And then that's what this energy can do. It can do it under the table kind of thing. And you send it out with a program. Okay, now this gets into programming. Okay, like a computer program, but this is energy. It's just pure energy. So you have to give it a program. I want it to go to this person at this place at this time, and I want him to have a heart attack or something like that.
Don't do
A
that.
hex, yeah.
Please don't.
Okay, yeah, it's a hex.
Nobody else is
Exactly.
doing it.
Exactly. So when you get into witchcraft, like Nathaniel can kind of chime in here, is that you take something that's precious to you or something that you have put your will into. Okay, this gets into familiars and other things. But if I put my will into this pin, and then I can point it or burn incense into a pot and grind it up and say some incantation, I'm focusing my mind, my will, on this incantation so it will have an effect. Like love potions and death potions and voodoo.
Why would you want to do that? Though? You can't mess with people's free will.
No. It's your subconscious. We're putting this into your subconscious mind.
Right.
So it kind of is saying that they would go into a trance state, which is going to speak to our hypnagogic, hypnopompic states, where a person is kind of in this kind of in between, a liminal state. Mantras can take you into a liminal state, and put that expression out. Is that expression now your energy going out, or is it simply a link to something else that's going to do the dirty work for you? I'd like everybody to talk on that one.
Yeah. I think
that's when you feed them. That's when you feed them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you feed them, you make them move.
A hungry ghost.
You give them the energy.
Excellent. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You give them the energy, and it can be, like I said, it can be the universe becomes compliant, and so it is a thought form, has no soul, has no reasoning power. It just has. It's designed like a bullet, has one effect: love, regeneration, hope. All these things are bullets in the minds of people, and we are emotional beings. I mean, our emotions run all the way through our bodies, and that's why the mind-body connection is very important. But at the same time, we react. We can react to, okay, our loved ones are in an accident. Hundreds of miles away. We don't even know it. We don't even have a phone call yet, but I feel it in my body because that signal has reached. Okay. If I can feel that trauma, then just think if that was something else.
Subconsciously speaking, you could lead them without you even knowing that you are.
It's like we're in an ocean, and a droplet falls into the ocean, and then the waves go out from there. That droplet is an emotion.
Yeah, it continues.
Yeah, it does.
It does go like an ocean, like a vibration. And we talk about things being vibrational. You know,
Yes.
where does the vibration stop? You know, hence my other comments about maybe some of the stuff collects. Nathaniel, what do you think?
I think it's an important subject. I mean, if we're looking at some entities becoming projections of our own conscious or our own subconscious, I think that's powerful. I mean, what if aliens, or at least some of these beings that we're witnessing, are projections of consciousness? Is that possible? Is that why you have an entity that can be fully bodied and then have something that can walk through a wall? They both look exactly alike, right? It's almost like a possession literature. They would call it a second self, right? Or an external soul, right? It's an extension of me. Mm-hmm. And there is some kind of relationship built where there's a puppet, and they have the puppet master, and that relationship. What I think we're tapping into tonight is something even deeper. Is that there's a whole new world of rules that we're starting to explore, rules that relate to the paranormal field, and that we as research. Now, dude, me and Dr. Lynch have talked for 3 or 4 hours at a time about this stuff, man. We can do this
Yes.
forever.
Yes.
But we're just now learning these rules that
Yes.
that the universe is applying to us.
Okay. The first rule that I've ever stumbled across, it was, okay, well, the first rule was love thy neighbor as thyself. But the reason for that is because of karmic law. The first law I ever came across was karmic law, meaning anything I do to you, I will experience in my past life review.
Right. At
so-
the end of the day, something near-death experiences often talk about and relates directly to this comment.
Exactly.
If you send out that negative or positive thought, energy doesn't it also return to you?
Okay.
Thank you. Good, great comment.
Extraterrestrials have to obey the same law. So many, not the reptilians, it's something with their brain, but many of them are very spiritual. They're very spiritual in nature. And the reason for that is because they don't want to experience that karmic law. They want you, they don't, it's kind of strange. They're kind of standoffish because they don't want to influence you because of their karmic law. And there's something called karmic debt. Okay. And I've got trillions of dollars in karmic debt that I got to pay off.
We all
And
do.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that originally. If I would have known
This is
that.
something that, like Kristen and I have talked about a
Yes.
lot ourselves, and she just put out there that, she believes in karmic law and
And
that I
do.
don't.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that I necessarily don't, but it just seems like on some levels, action causes a reaction.
Right.
If you upset me and I punch you in the nose, it's not karma that I punched you in the nose,
No.
right? Or somebody else gets pissed. I mean, there's a ripple effect to our actions
There
anyways.
is.
So is that really karma, or is it just action reaction? What are you guys' thoughts?
There's action reaction. Now, karma law comes under whether I emotionally or mentally want to do you ill, and it's like predatorial effect. That's why predatorial murder is or certain types of murder are different. There's accidental murder. There's predatorial murder. There's different types of murder, and we have different laws for that. We have different crimes for that. But the deal is that it's all the same. It's all the same. Whether it's us, angels, guides, extraterrestrials, we all have to obey that universal karmic law first. And then the other side is to pay off the karmic debt that we have accrued over many different lifetimes. Okay, I'll never pay it off. I've got to come back 3 more times. That's just the way it is. I mean, I'm always at the grindstone trying to pay off my karmic debt. And yet each one of our destinies may not ever pay that off. And that's why we keep coming back.
A bit like,
like
say,
that.
Osiris or Anubis in the afterlife and Egyptian mythology are crossing over. We were talking about this last night.
The heart.
They are with the feather and the heart, right? And they've got your heart and you got the scales, and if the heart is too heavy, you get devoured. Your soul is devoured by Amut, I think his name was, the devourer. He was known as, and that was done. And if not, you were in the field of freeze.
Where do we get that today? It is the statue of justice that is blind, that has a sword and scales.
Right.
The statue of justice is
That's right.
the same thing as the Egyptians talked about your karma or your karmic debt. Now, okay, now if you're Irish, we all go to heaven because we all have hearts of gold, which outweigh the feather. Okay, so the feather, we always go to heaven. But anyway, what I'm saying is, what I'm saying, way I look at this is that, okay, first, do no harm, because of karmic law. 2 is try to reduce your karmic debt, and that's not like your carbon footprint or anything like that. It's the debt that you take out of your life. Okay, and then we get into other things like that. Nathaniel can probably talk about historical laws. in Egypt, there was the 42 laws of Met or Ket.
Yeah, right.
Right. And that's where
MPT.
and that's where our 10 commandments come from. That's what Moses had to learn as a child. And so when he got to Mount Sinai, he just typed them out on some tablets, what he could remember.
Mhm.
And he put Yahweh, Jehovah at the top. Don't know why, because Jehovah was just another space alien. But the whole thing is that the Egyptians understood karmic debt. And they wanted to.
They certainly did with those scales. Nathaniel, what do you say about that? What say you, sir?
About what specifically? That's the best subject.
Karma,
Man.
do you think it exists? Maybe historical examples, or just your personal feeling or insights about karmic laws?
I believe it exists, and I think that some people will not get what they deserve in this life, but they will in another. And I think that's how it works. That's my opinion.
Greg?
Not very
Well,
deep.
When you talk about old souls, or if you're an old soul, that would be directly proportional to the amount of debt that you have to pay off.
Do you think it takes lifetimes to pay off some of that debt? You could have just been such an asshole in one life that you come back 4 times. But the times,
my guides do the same thing as Dr. Michaels, in the respect that they lead me. I ask them to lead me
To guide.
I know if I don't, I can get in a lot of those situations where I would create that kind of debt.
No, I know I love the idea of guides, and I use them personally. We both do, but I also have had the thought, because Nathaniel and I have had this conversation. What if the guide you get goes astray? Is it possible that you could just not be talking to what you think is your guides, and you're talking to something that maybe has a little bit of a nefarious intent? Some thoughts?
I think it comes from the heart.
Yeah.
Is that? What do you think, Nathan? Are there people
About the
out there that
guides?
maybe have the wrong guides that can lead them astray?
Well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. That remote viewer that I had worked with, Lisa's son, met guides that carved religious amulets into his skin. That wasn't a cool thing to do.
No.
So with Dr. Carla Turner's work, Ted Rice had guides until he realized that they wanted to have intercourse with his grandma.
Oh,
right? Not a very cool thing to do, right?
Was she a gilf?
Well, I think again,
Bad joke.
there does seem to be real authentic guides, ancestors, whatever you want to term them as. But again, there's also entities out there that will play the role of a guide. They'll play literally to a T, a role, and to gain trust. And then next thing you know, they'll flip, just like they did with Edward Kelly, John D. I'm going to give you something, but I'm going to want something in return. And so it's just like there's angels and demons, there's aliens, there's good aliens. So there's always a counter to what's really occurring. And in theological terms, we call it a type and shadow. You have to have a type in order for there to be a shadow of it. And so, yes, there are entities that will play the role of a guide. But that doesn't mean that there are not guides. There are guides.
Right.
Don't you think though that you would experience that after a certain time period, and then you could come to the conclusion that maybe you are on the wrong trail with them?
Right.
And
maybe you would become more obsessed, right? I mean,
yes.
You say they gain your trust. That is the symptom of like a possession. They want to get your trust.
Well, I'm saying strictly because of the fact that that's where I'm at. Everybody else is on their different plane.
Right. They're all
As
different.
far as how we, and our trust is pure. My trust is pure, and it hasn't happened to me. And all I could go on is what I believe.
Right.
And I understand everything that you said, Nathaniel, on that other show. And
What
it's
other
sort
show?
of the other show that you were on when you were on what a
Oh,
week ago,
okay.
and it
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
it sort of caught me.
Okay.
It sort of caught me because I'm still at a very young age
Mhm.
when it comes to where I am in proportion to my belief system.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, I've been around the block 100,000 times. I finally come to that little chunk of gold, and I'm going to believe in it to the very end, unless something happens drastically wrong.
Mhm.
And that's why I believe the way I do. And I'm
That's
not
good.
doing that to say that. I'm doing it because I really believe in it. So
Sure.
you can't go any other way than that. But I understand exactly what you have been saying, and Dr. Mike, the same thing.
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think
it's just a
I think
possibility.
it's unbelievable that you guys, and we're sitting here and we're talking about this, and it's actually making me. I'm producing much more energy than I did 20 minutes ago.
Mhm.
Okay.
We'll all be doing the Estes method in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's playful. Let's go.
Moderator.
Okay. I'm going to just jump in first, just a second.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, I want everyone to kind of really ponder this. And I mean, everybody who's watching and all that stuff. Okay. Now, let's say I die and I go up to the pearly gates and I talk to St. Peter, and St. Peter goes, "Okay, Michael, you're in heaven. You can go do whatever you want to do. You can go anywhere you want to go in the entire afterlife, the entire universes, all 50 universes. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, I'm going to go back to my log cabin in the woods and hang out there, or my mansion in Central Park, next to Central Park, and hang out there." And St. Peter goes, "Okay, done. I'm going to write it in the book." And all of a sudden, boom, you're in your little slice of heaven. Whatever you requested, wherever you wanted to be for your heavenly life, that's where you get sent. So when you investigate an old hospital or mansion or whatever, and there is a ghost there, and that ghost is not going to leave, and everyone thinks, "Oh well, we're in a different dimension or time, or it's a residual haunting, or it's a residential haunting." It could be. Just think about this. That person wanting to spend some eternity back in his old home or his old land, and then that's where he goes.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. And this is something near death experiences
I
we've
was going to
talked
ask,
about.
yeah, about the
So-
ending.
It begs the question though, like, could there be something better than what you might have experienced or known in this life? Right? Could there be a better heaven that you have never experienced yet? Maybe your heaven is like in Aruba, but you've never been to Aruba. What
That's
do you
right.
guys think?
That's right. When I die, my frequent flyer miles are free, so I can go anywhere I want to go. There's no. When they take pictures of the ancient pyramids at Giza, there's hundreds of thousands of orbs out there, and everyone says, "Oh, that's just dust." Maybe there's just more tourists.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
so Zach Baggins goes into a haunted hotel or a haunted house or whatever. Okay. Well, what if those people just wanted to be there?
It's very true.
That's their slice of heaven. That's just their slice of heaven.
It could be. Laurie says it's not dust.
It's not dust.
That's right.
Greg,
It's not.
What are your thoughts? We're going to answer the big questions tonight. Like, what happens when I die? I think we all want to know that answer, right?
Okay.
Who does?
Okay. I'm going to use this analogy, and this is the best analogy I can explain. The analogy is water. Okay. I take an ice cube out of the refrigerator and I put it in a pot. The ice cube is solid matter. It is solid, slow-moving molecular matter. I heat it up. It turns into a liquid, okay? And the next stage is steam, okay? Each time it changes its energy, it changes its state of matter, and will equally go to where it needs to go next. So when we die, our spirits go to where its energy is equalized, and that's in the afterlife. So the whole idea is each time we evolve or change, the energy, we're not talking material matter, the energy goes to the next level. But we have an energy which we call plasma. Okay. It's not only in our bodies as plasma or hemoglobin, it is the energy that makes us tick. It's our consciousness, it's our spirit, it's our loves, it's our hates, it's our memories. And then when we die, the material world goes away and we pop out of our heads. Nathaniel can go, not only go out your abdomen, but you'll pop out and then you'll go straight. Why? To the afterlife. Because why? The energy of your consciousness goes to where it vibrates equally with everything else.
All right, the energy never goes away. We're drinking the same water that the dinosaurs drank.
Right.
You know, people don't think about this. It's just the biosphere, this 3D matrix planet of ours. Like the water just goes back into the clouds and it comes back down. It's some of the same water.
And that is the exact truth. We will go back to the cloud. And then when we come back down as a raindrop, we become back into a human body or an alien body or whatever planet we go back to. The whole idea is that we're a singular form for a limited time until we hit the ground, and then we evaporate again and return to that stage of energy, which is back in the cloud. So that is humankind. We start in the afterlife. We go as a circle, as a little raindrop for a limited time until we die. And then we go back to the cloud because that's where the energy equals everything else in the environment.
Yeah, kind of like a new age perspective would be like back to source.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's like Neo going back to the Matrix. He's got to go back to source, and that's the source code, and that's where everything is created in the source code by the architect or by the brain that runs that world. And that's the whole construct, is that mankind recreates himself. So a computer, the internet is just an extension of the brain neural networks all over the planet that cannot die. The network cannot die.
Excellent. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. I'm going to defer to a great question out here from Laurie. She says, what do you think about mental illness such as schizophrenia and negative or demonic attachments? Nathaniel.
I would defer to Jerry Marzinski's work. Jerry Marzinski had a case study. By the way, he's a clinical psychologist. He had a case study where a man was coming in to the clinic and he had a cocaine addiction. And he was a business executive, and so he was very well off. As soon as he would start doing coke, he would start hearing voices, and these independent entities would give him instructions. I want you to hurt people. I want you to do this. And so he would keep going through this behavioral pattern where he would get clean. He would get out of the clinic. He would get his family back, get his job back, his credits back up. And then suddenly he'd stumble back in, hungover, trying to dry out, get sobered up. And so finally, Jerry Marzinski sat him down one day and said, look, man, I've had enough of this. I've been doing this for years. I need to know what's going on. He said, well, he said, when I get clean, the voices stop. He said, but what's been happening lately is in the middle of the nighttime, I'll have a dream or something, and I'll wake up, and that voice will come to me and say, I want you to get in the car, and I want you to drive. And he said, and so I almost go into a trance-like state, and 30 minutes later, I'm in the middle of a cornfield, and the entity tells me, pick up that black duffel bag, and there's cocaine inside of it. So, yeah, I mean, there are some attachments.
There was. Right.
But it was almost that entity grooming him, right, to somehow create a bridge for this being or these beings to inhabit or to attach themselves to him. So I do certainly believe there are some people who are assumed to be mentally ill, but that doesn't mean that there are entities out there that are using mental illness to hide behind. But mental illness exists. I think that to a large degree, the Catholic Church has done great damage to the understanding of possession. Forget the debunk phenomenon, we don't care, right? And so that's what we have to sift through the dogma and look at the data. So attachments exist, mental illness exists. I think that what the line is crossed when that being, just like Philip, begins to give you things that stretch outside of your own knowledge and awareness. Where's that duffel bag at? You had no idea where it was. No, it pointed you to it. That's when, in my mind, it becomes an independent entity. It's exterior. It has its own belief system, and Doc and I call it memory and motion.
That's right.
Doc and I.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's my point.
I think spirit release therapy is a legitimate practice, right? And people like the late Dr. Terrence Palmer used to talk about that. The Wicklins from the spiritualist movement, a couple who would go into asylums and treat people through hypnosis. And I guess the lady Wicklin, I forget her first name, she was a medium. He was a psychiatrist or psychologist by trade. I think he ended up running that particular hospital.
Yeah.
They would go in there and they were releasing people because they were removing the attachments. Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I started out in that same light when I came back from the war, and I continued down that, as Joshua Dixon says, the slippery slope. So I was presented with a whole bunch of different scenarios of what I could possibly do to enhance my experience, and I went ahead and took advantage of it to the point of I was going to be done. I decided it was all over. I came back. I was put away for 10 weeks in a treatment program. Came out of the treatment program, and all I had was, like everybody tells you, a coffee cup. That's the only belief system that I had. I had to strip myself of everything else and start to believe. And it carried me through that program of AA, and we did a wanderers group of people that were like-minded, people that all knew. And the reason we hung around together was we knew how we would manipulate ourselves to get into situations. So consequently, after that finally stopped with me, I came to some sort of like I was missing something, and I came across, I was already into the paranormal, and I came across a great friend of mine and mentor whose name is Scotty Rourke, and he's a psychic medium, and he took me under his wing and nurtured me and sort of helped me along in my path. And it helped me understand a great deal of myself and how I function and how I have to deal with situations that even when I was sober, I still didn't have a real clue of how to handle a lot of things. So this all came into the same kind of thing where, you still had those thoughts, can you become a schizophrenic? Is this going to affect me in this way or shape or form? Or what am I really? Am I really out of my mind? And he took me on an introduction phase of my guides and how to find my guides. And it took weeks and weeks and weeks to go ahead and come to some conclusion as far as who my first guide was. And it would be in meditation, and I would be doing it every day. I would be doing it 3 times a day. And I would still finally ran into my first guide in a forest. a dark forest, and this
Wow.
shadow figure came around the corner, and I looked, and I just went ahead and I said, wow, what am I going to call you? And this is the honest to God truth. This was, of all people, this was Hopalong Cassidy.
Oh,
Now-
now I get the correlation. Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, everybody in this that's listening right now thinks I'm the biggest crazy man on the planet.
We don't.
Okay,
Sir.
but in reality, this was a child when I was a real little kid. This was a hero of mine that I had totally. He was so far out of my mind, it wasn't even funny. And all of a sudden, who would I run into but him?
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I'm
it shows
just
up as a
talking
people
about it. I have
of
goosebumps
strength,
because
right?
it was showing me this is the way. And I continued to go down the process, and I continued to work at it. And at the same time, I was still doing investigations and trying to understand spirits and understand the way, if I was a spirit, how I would want to be treated. And if there was a spirit that happened to be in the room that was sort of negative, well, there's a reason he's negative. There's got to be, so you try to go ahead and present it to them in a sense where it would be a question and answer type period, where you would go ahead and say, hey, I know you're having issues, is there anything I could help you with? And just start on that gauge and work from there. And I'm still way too new, when it comes to that. I'm not no Hans Holzer. I never will be. You know what I mean? And this is where you have to put yourself. You have to put yourself in the mood or the attitude that there are much better people than yourself. And if you need help, there's people like you guys that can always answer the questions.
Well, this is great because we started talking about like attachments and how they might do something negative, right? So we talked about the sort of paranormal outside thing that would affect your own behavior, but now in your situation, we've kind of reversed it. So you were in that bad situation, and it took something positive that was also exterior to yourself to pull you out of it. For lack of better terms, it's not a paranormal, right? It's a
and it's not a bad life.
body.
It's really not. I mean, and I would love to be able to say I would end up, on Pallades or wherever you want to say, and live forever. But we're all in the same ship, I think.
No, this is really cool.
Yeah, actually, Cameron, I don't know how to spell their last name. Say their last name. Had said something similar to that as well. Show.
Sure. There's a few comments there. We got quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few comments up there. We really appreciate you guys. Contributing to the conversation. This is open lines. I can tell you that I did a spirit guide meditation not long ago, and I did get into a good trance state with it. I was using HemiSync, and I don't endorse. I endorse the product, but not officially endorse. Don't pay me, but I talk about them because they're good quality products. And in that state, I saw what appeared to me as a guide was sort of I don't want to say exactly a fairy, but kind of an elemental spirit in the woods. It's what made me think of it, Greg, as you mentioned that. And for whatever reason, I was following him through the woods. Something that looked a little like Groot, I've told her, but without the head.
Made out of branches. And
kind of made out of sticks and branches.
Chris
and
was really into elementals.
And I had this thing, and other people have said, you get this elemental thing about you. And I'm like, well, it turned up that way, after the fact. And the other thing I saw was something that looked a bit like we imagine an alien, like a gray to be, except the eyes were not big. They were like human eyes, and the skin was absolutely white. It just kind of turned its head and looked, and I got this sort of knowing feeling. And, I think these things can come from anywhere. It's amazing.
I think I'll tell you what, man, one of the most fascinating aspects of this, it comes down to a quote from the Babylonian flood epic, the Atreus epic, and it talks about how the ghost of a man is made from the flesh of a god. And so if the question is begged, what do we become when we die? Are we evolving? Because we know for sure people evolve and have evolved at the moment of death. But it does speak to a certain texture to consciousness, a tangibility to it, right? To where it can come in and out of existence. We had one religious scholar said that that some ghosts or entities could materialize by hardening the moisture in the air, solidifying it, coagulated moisture, and then stepping into it as an image. But this gets into apparitional theory, right? What is it that dies? The body dies, but what is it that leaves the body? The ghost. And so what Dr. Lynch and I have talked about for hours and hours on end is how that in many possession cases, we see memory in motion. It's not a fallen angel. It's not a demon. It's a literal person who has language preference. It has its own belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we won't hear that in TV shows because it does not fit the narrative.
Right.
Right. Nobody's going to write checks to defeat dogma.
Right. It goes
That's
to
right.
a lot of things.
That's right.
Archaeology, just
Right.
a whole bunch of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, you're
They
right.
call it pseudo archaeology. They call it like pseudo
Pseudoscience.
whatever.
And,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Paranormal Investigations. It's a pseudoscience by Chris French. He gave a 2-hour lecture on how ghost busting or ghost investigation was just nothing but poppycock. Now, that's just like an idiot. That's an idiot talking about idiots. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
and that's the truth. That is the truth. Paranormal that is like going to the moon. We do it not because it is easy, because it is hard. And we need to study the paranormal, and we need to get, like Nathan said, we need to write down the rule book. What are the laws? What do we need to do? What steps we need to take so that we don't become demonically possessed, so we don't have these attachments, so we don't have these lost entities attaching themselves to us. And they can do that. Now, is schizophrenia real? Yes, as a consciousness in the brain is an effect. Now, is schizophrenia the first step to telepathy? Absolutely. But given the right drugs, and there's a lot out there, pharmaceutical companies love to force them down our throats.
Yes,
But
they do.
Band-Aid anything.
there are several drugs that will stop or dampen schizophrenia. Now, in the old days, they would go in and have a frontal lobotomy, and then they would have electroshock therapy. I mean, it's like a caveman beating a Ferrari engine with a club. He has no idea how to fix it. He has no idea what he's doing. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Okay.
Point.
Okay. So when we pray, that's called prayer.
Mhm.
We talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. And that's lunacy. That's just lunacy. Okay.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. And so the whole thing boils down to is, like Greg said, am I crazy? No, you're just seeing a new reality. The way things really work, the world as it is, and the way we live in it is being revealed. Paul said the scales fell from my eyes and I could see, and that's the whole idea, is that we're trapped, like Nathaniel said, in dogma and fear and superstition. But once all that fades away and we're no longer afraid and we live in fact, then we can go on with our lives with no fear, because we trust what we know. We not believe it. I have no belief. I have facts. And those facts are this: if you have guides, that means they volunteered to be with you, to advise you. And that is how they're paying off some of their karmic debt. And so they see Dr. Lynch and they go, oh, Dr. Lynch is just really messed up, man. He's just, he's got a 4-martini lunch and he just doesn't know when to stop. And the point being is that they come down and say, okay, well, I'll volunteer to help him. They could be a relative. They may not be a relative at all. They just see me in trouble, and they'll come down, and then they'll subtly give me suggestions on what not to do to better myself. Okay, as I listen, or as I'm affected by their information, I then change my habits, which reduces their karmic debt, and then they go down. Now, we've talked about fashion angels and parking lot angels and all this other stuff. Okay, those angels come down and they're with us all the time. And we don't die. We don't die. Believe you me, we live forever as soon as the Creator created us, you. As soon as the Creator created you, your consciousness, your energy lives forever. It cannot be destroyed. Okay?
Mhm.
And you decide where you're going to spend your afterlife. Okay? My father wanted to be a cowboy and a farmer all of his life. And somewhere in the afterlife, he's out there plowing a field. And he's helping other farmers plow their fields and wrestle the cattle and shoot a 6-gun or whatever his idea of heaven is, that is what is given to him.
I hope
And-
it would be able to evolve too, right? So you say,
Yeah.
"Wow, we go to this perfect place," but maybe you get sick of the perfect place. Maybe it
Yes,
doesn't work for
yes.
me. And,
And-
I want to go back to that Aruba again.
And so people get tired of that and they go, well, Dr. Lynch is all messed up. Let's go down and help him because I'm tired of living in heaven. I'm going to go down and, help him or do something helpful. Okay. There's an old Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock have to go back in time and to meet Joan Collins. Okay. And Captain Kirk talks about a man who wrote a book called Can I Help? And that book changes the philosophy of the entire solar system, because man, after the Third World War, man got to a point to where he was only going to help himself. He wasn't going to help anybody else. And so this guy writes this book saying, can I help? And then that changes the fundamental philosophy of everything. And then everyone started helping each other. And they became the guides of their friends. We all chipped in and became a harmonious civilization after that simple concept.
I
Okay.
think charity is good for the soul. Absolutely. And I'm going to turn to a question. Michelle has a question for us. She asks, what are your beliefs on poltergeist cases in the paranormal? Do you think they come from a living agent? And this kind of speaks a little
That's
bit
what Cameron had asked earlier.
to our earlier conversation about tulpas and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. For me, my definition is that poltergeist is something that's not from here. It could be from any other planet. It could be from, heaven or whatever. But what it is a noisy, mischievous ghost entity that doesn't relate well to our environment. And we can eventually ask it to leave because it's very childlike. It's very childish. It's very childlike. And so if you ever get one's attention long enough, you can actually talk to it and convince it that it needs to go someplace else. But it's not an entity as we understand human consciousness, our human relation. It's something totally different. It's like angels. They're totally different. If you talked about paying your bills or making money, they don't even have the concept of money. What is money? It's like, I talked to an angel one time. It's like, man, I'd like to get a raise at work. And the angel goes, what's that? It's like,
Right.
okay, well, it's like money, money, legal tender. And the angel goes, I have no frame of reference for that at all.
Wow. Oh, very good. Very good. Nathaniel, your thoughts on the noisy ghost?
Oh, poltergeist exists, but I think that the question is framed. It's really framed well. We had a parapsychologist who was just shameful, and I ain't gonna tell you who he is because I ain't trying to throw anybody underneath the bus. But poltergeist exists. But he had a particular case where a woman had 2 sons, and she was being assaulted in a very intimate way by an unseen force. Her body is convulsing, and it was by 2 entities. And so, in shoddy research, he said that's a poltergeist because she had 2 sons. Now, it's not a poltergeist. So while poltergeist exists, in the very, the essence of what Dr. Lynch is articulating, I think that many people will misinterpret an incubi case with the poltergeist. Come on, classic incubus case.
That is
right?
a fact. That's a fact.
High five, baby. What's up? High five. What's
Yeah,
up? Yeah. And so that's what we have to do in the field. And I think it's important to correctly diagnose it. We cannot tell this woman that she wanted to be assaulted like this, and then in some elementary uninitiated fashion say, well, there's 2 sons, there's 2 entities, therefore, like that, it's so pedestrian in many ways that it's disgusting. And that's my little rant, but that does point to the fact, obviously, poltergeist exists in the way you articulate it. However, I think that in the field, many times people will just go with its poltergeist and not actually ask the more difficult questions. Why are these, this particular case study, why were these beings doing this to her? One seemed to be holding her down while the other entity attacked her. That's not really something that just opens doors or throws something against the wall. That's
Right.
a premeditated act of violence.
Intelligence.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah. So what I agree that they exist, but many times they're misinterpreted because many parapsychologists, they don't want to see some of these entities as negative. They will try to go around it and just create this just baloney. So poltergeist exists, but not everything's poltergeist.
Right.
And we have to be willing and intellectually honest enough to say, okay, listen, this is a little bit negative, which obviously that case study was.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Excellent points, Greg.
Okay, go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
Nice ghost.
I think it's a misplaced entity or spirit who has. I don't think it's as dangerous as it comes across as being.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the interpretation of the act and why they're doing the act, in the sense that they could be gone ahead and perceived in that light. Yet, if they're confronted on it, maybe if there's a way to confront them, that we would find out that there's a particular reason why they want to stress the point rather than let it go off kilter as they do. I'm talking out of my head right now, actually,
Sure.
because when you talk about something like a poltergeist, I think it has to come from experience, number one. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've seen on TV. I haven't experienced a poltergeist. So I think that's number one. It's up to interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By experience alone, and you can't just, like what I was saying was, I thought I would say it would be misplaced.
Right.
In that sense, and leave it at that. And the extreme acts that they go about doing, like what was said earlier, was the fact that it's like an incubus type situation, and
the pathology changes, right? That's when
right.
it's important. When the pathology changes, and then it's like, okay, wait a minute, we're going this direction, right? This is no longer a poltergeist. It's something more.
Right. Getting into something else entirely, really.
It's only motive. It's motive operandi, and that's what that determines the different path. Okay, there was an entity case. There was a movie about it called The Entity with I think Barbara Hershey. It's an old movie. It's also a book. Barry Taft and Bill Roll and a couple of others cut their teeth on that case. Okay, and they were recording it and taking Polaroid photos and everything, and they were capturing the entity itself. Now, the entity would rape the woman, the mother. Okay, and they came out later saying that it was her dead husband's spirit, and was having sex with his living wife, but he's dead, so he's having sex with it. And that narrowed it down quite a bit, but it was not like a poltergeist or it was demonic in every way. But once they figured it all out, they said it was her dead husband. Now, she moved several times thinking it was in the house, but it would always end up following her. Even years later, it would come back and molest her again. Now, I did have a case like this, and it was of a dead person who found a young girl, and she was being molested as she slept, and she would wake up and she would feel like she's having sex. Now, there's no one in her bed, there's no one there. But what we found out was the entity was very protective, and we also found out that the entity died nearby and kind of picked up this girl and liked the relationship and overstepped its bounds. I'm not saying it cannot happen. I'm just saying it's very selective because it's looking for someone who's compliant to that to a certain extent. You know, that's why if you're on a lot of drugs or alcohol or depressed or whatever, these are the areas because you lower your defenses. And then these are the areas that they come in.
I know. Was that the entity that became the movie The Entity?
Yes.
You were mentioning reference to Barry Taft. It's really interesting because she had alcohol and drug issues, I believe, as well. And when she resolved them, I believe it went away.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know, that's when that finally stopped for her.
Okay. Now you can. Oh, you have a picture. You have a picture. Okay. You have a picture of your aura. An aura photo.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I have an aura.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up here.
That's your protection right there. Is your aura, and the stronger that aura is, it's like a force field. They can't really get in. Okay. So the stronger your aura is, the if it doesn't have any holes in it, it is the best first defense. You know, boundary defense. And the other thing is to ask for protection constantly.
Excellent.
Right.
Excellent.
Wasn't that lady's name Doris Bither? Was that Doris Bither, the Bither case with Barry Taft?
Something like that. Yeah.
I can really remember. I know they eventually made that movie. People might remember from the 80s, The Entity, but I've read about the case and Barry's work in that, and he did that with someone else. I think you mentioned their name, Michael.
Bill Roll. Bill Roll did a lot of paranormal research, and he was a doctor of something. I forgot what it was, but he did a lot of interesting things. Now, he went to the Queen Mary. Now, the Queen Mary that sits in, I think, San Diego or Los Angeles Harbor, the QE2, had an accident during World War II where the front of the ship hit another ship and hundreds of people died on both sides. And he went into it and set up a tape recorder and recorded it, and so just let it run. And about 2 a.m. to 3 a.m., he heard men shouting and running around as if there was an accident, an echo, residual of that traumatic incident. Okay. So Lloyd Auerbach went to the USS Hornet? No, was it the Hornet? It was an aircraft carrier that's now a museum.
I think it might have been the Hornet. I think I know where you're going with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when he got on board, he couldn't use any of his devices because it was a metal ship. And so the only thing he could do was have a psychic come in and believe every word she said. And man, that's bad. Now with my equipment, I don't rely on the electromagnetic damping like a Faraday cage or whatever. So I can do it visually. So when I do it visually, I don't need other instruments, for that. But at the same time, you've got to know your environment, and you have to know what devices will work in each environment, and that's where everybody diverges. Because the REM pod or the ghost pod is my choice. An EVP box or spirit box is my choice. They all have their tool that works best for them. Which I have no. If you get data from that, that is excellent. But just be aware of what environment it works best in, and then stay in that environment.
It's good to have a backup
Yeah.
plan. So I think that's good to have, like, say, the dowsing rods, a pendulum.
Definitely.
That don't require any kind of electronics along
Yourself.
with your gear, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Your gear and your feelings.
like I keep telling people to just, if you want to feel, you got to keep working at it. Like Greg said, every day, meditate 3 times a day. I know it sounds like something like you don't want to do or anything, but it honestly, that's how you grow.
That's right.
So if you want to be do it yourself, you can.
When you brought up
Be
the
your own psychic.
when
I
you
agree.
brought up the Elizabeth in California, there's a lady that I know who has done extensive work on this. Her name is Nicole Strickland, and she is like the Bible as far as the QE2.
Right.
And she's an amazing lady. She was with the group GRS with me on the south side of Chicago, and I've been with her a couple times on the shows, and it's remarkable to hear some of the stories that she has. And I know that I've been on a destroyer in Bremerton, Washington. That's the USS Turner Joy. And I haven't had the opportunity, and I will be back for sure because I have family out there. And on that ship, you could use a recorder. You could use quite a few. The only difference is you have to go ahead and use pure energy. You can't use the electrical energy. I mean, for instance, static electricity is great. It's your pure energy. So that's where that comes into play. And I, just for being there, I know, you can go down to certain rooms and certain hallways, and they're there. And that was the ship that started. It came in the end of World War II. It was the one that was hit in the Bay of Tonkin that started the war in Vietnam. And then it fired the last round in the war when they were taking everybody out of the embassy. So, and that's had people that, have died on it. So it's a remarkable ship. I wish I got on some of the aircraft carriers out there, but
I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Very cool. And I've seen Nicole on your Shadow Hour show.
Yeah.
That was a great interview. And just throw you a plug here. Greg goes to the show, the Shadow Hour, every Friday. Right.
8 o'clock Central Time.
8 Central, 9 p.m. Shadow Hour is a good show. And that was a particularly good one. I liked her insight on the boat because from being there so many times, it was a little deeper than what you might find in Google.
I mean, for both of these gentlemen, between Nathaniel and can I call you Dr. Mike?
Sure, that's fine.
It's okay.
That's great.
I just I'm awed by both you people when it comes to the conversations that I've heard you guys involved in, and I'm sort of sitting here going, man alive, I don't know if I should even be in this room right now.
You should absolutely be.
Absolutely should.
No,
Absolutely.
man. Don't think like that, brother. We're all experiencers and researchers and partners. We're trying to pilgrimage further into the mystery and majesty of this phenomenon. That's the beautiful part of it. But guys, I got to get out of here. We'll go to bed. Chris and Christian, I love you guys. Dr. Lynch,
love you guys.
Dude.
Love you, man.
Mr. Greg,
Daniel, it's great meeting you. It's been
Yes,
awesome.
sir.
Thank you very much.
For joining us.
God bless
Michael,
you guys.
Dr.
Thanks
Mike.
for coming on. Speak to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take your
It's-
conversation to it. Oh, go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry. Finish what you were
No,
saying.
I was just going to say, hey, I don't know how many times I've seen you, doctor, and it's always very impressive, and you always take me down a path that I never would have went that night, and that's like a story in itself,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to be about.
That's right. It's human or personal discovery. This is the way you talk to yourself. Ghost investigation is not for the thrill or for the spookiness of it. It's how you reason. It's how you discuss it. Everything communicate with yourself, and then that gives you personal strength. And then the next step becomes a little bit easier. I have a saying. It's called baby steps and deep breaths, and you will get to any destination, no matter how afraid you are, no matter how stressed you are. Now, I just want to say this: about 6 years into investigating, maybe 7, we got to a point to where we were not ghost investigators because that was easy. We became ghost profilers, and we needed to know the motive of each entity that was occupying a hotel, a house, a school. We needed to know their side of the story. And that
why
was
they were doing these things, right?
Right.
The pathology.
the pathology. That's right. And so, like any detective, sometimes you have to work backwards from the crime or backwards from the motive. So, okay, there was this one case. It wasn't mine directly, but the case was almost exactly like one of my cases that I had, and it was where this guy would go into his kitchen, which his kitchen was, which his house was like almost 150 years old, and he would always smell baking bread, and he just didn't understand it. So he called a friend of mine who was a psychic, and she went out, and she got out there very early in the morning, and they walked in, and she walked in, he let her in, and she says, I could smell the baked bread. And I said, well, did you ask the entity what was going on or what was the deal? And she goes, yes. She goes, the lady who's still there is baking bread for her family. And she didn't even know anybody else was there or in the room or even existed. She was just locked into this mindset of baking bread for her family. Now, is she pushing the rock up the hill and letting it fall back down? I don't know. But the whole idea is that you need to find out where are they? Where are they? Their mindset. Okay, let me tell you a quick story. I have a very good friend, and she's a hypnotherapist. I may have told you this story before, but this guy came in, and he thought he had a torn shoulder ligament, a torn muscle, or whatever. And his doctors come in and say, no, you don't. X-rays don't show anything torn, MRIs don't show anything torn. But he says, man, my shoulder it's killing me. It just hurts all the time. And so the doctors just say, oh, well, you must have sprained it, and it didn't, mend right or whatever. So the next thing, he shows up at my friend's office, and she's a hypnotherapist. And she says, we put him in the chair. Okay. And he goes under hypnosis, deep hypnosis. And then she says, okay, I want you to come out of your body. Okay. And look around. And the guy says, okay, I'm going out of my body. He looks around the room, and he says, there's something sitting on my shoulder, sucking the energy out of my body.
Wow.
And she goes, okay. Then she turned, she kind of turned, to the side. And she said, okay, is there anyone in heaven who knows this entity and can call it home, take it to heaven? And then all of a sudden, the guy goes, I hear a voice. And she says, whose voice is that? And he goes, it's God's voice. And he's calling that entity to him. And the entity, he says he watches the entity go off his shoulder and go right out of the room. And he says through his out of body state, he can see this white like tunnel, and the entity just goes right up into it and disappears.
Wow.
So she takes him and she puts him back into his body. And then she slowly goes back and she, says, is there anything else wrong with your body that we need to address? And he goes, no, I don't think so. So then she says, in the count of 10, you're going to wake up. And he goes, okay. And so she counts to 10, count down. When she gets to 0, she snaps her fingers. He wakes up and he goes, wow. He goes, I had such a weirdest dream. And she goes, well, does your shoulder hurt anymore? And he goes, no, it doesn't.
That's incredible.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So there's your entity attachment. Now, the only thing that she could conclude, she told me, she goes, Mike, the only thing I can conclude is that he goes gambling a lot. And a lot of times he drinks while he gambles. And that could have been the reason why he got an attachment. Just some lost soul. And so anyway, every time she tells that story to me, or every time I would try to repeat it, I'd cry. Because the Creator does not forget you at all. He calls you by name. I will, Jesus says, you'll be known by your name. He'll call you. You'll know it. And then when psychics call a name, like, are you related to Joe Smith? If Joe Smith's relatives are nearby, come in and talk to me. And they're right here. Heaven is right around us. It's always here. And they go, well, how's it like in heaven? And they go, well, how's it like where you're sitting? Because I'm right next to you. I'm right over your shoulder. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I have had a couple of sessions on my own. And I tell you what, miracles happen in the strangest way with the strangest people. And I want to tell Greg there, when you're ready, when your mind is ready, the teacher will come. And you may need just one lesson, or maybe you need 2 or 10. I know I probably needed 1,000. But the teacher will come and teach you so that you can get to the next step, like the elementals, like these guides. And we talked about the Georgia Guidestones. So your last will and testament, your guides, that is all a fact of our reality. And if you ask for it, really are sincere, they will come. Now, I had this one guide, and he was really cool, but he was really out of my league, But he taught me how to dowse. I borrowed him, and he taught me how to dowse. So anyway, the whole thing is that when he got done with me, anyone who works with me should get a pay raise, and he definitely got a raise. He was like a level 10 or something like that. And the last time I talked to him, he was like a level 15. There's only 15 levels of guides. Okay. And they all have different strengths and different reasons. And he said, it's like this. It's like your government. There's senators and congressmen, and they're all like mill around in one big building. And he says, I said, well, do you like wear name tags or badges or something to see what rank you are? And he goes, no, not really, but everybody kind of knows, what rank you are. So a lot of times they get started out at around, 6. And at 6, they feel confident enough to come and volunteer to be your guide. And then as their karmic debt lowers down and they get a little bit better, then they rise up. And so they start around 6 before they can help you. And then they build up to 15. And at 15, they are the guide supreme. You can't get any higher than 15. And if you're a human spirit, the next level you can go to, the only next level you can achieve is angelic. You can only be an angel after that. Now, we've talked about angels, and they are the will and function of the Creator. That's all they do. They go because they are the will, they carry the will, and they perform the function of the Creator. So think of it like not like messengers or emissaries. In a way they are, but also they're connected directly to the creator. Their entire existence is from the creator, which is way cool. Because when you're talking to angels, you whisper to an angel that goes directly to God's ear.
All right. Well, that's interesting because we had a comment over here from Laurie about asking about hellhounds. And recently I was reading in Greek mythology, and in particular Hecate is often seen with dogs, and they call them hellhounds and things like that in the art of the time and since, certainly.
Yeah.
And I guess at that time, those dogs weren't really dogs. They were more like demons, but more like daemons with the A. And they were supposed to be messengers that could message from the afterlife, the what did they call it? The underworld. Up to the heavens. They were basically angel translates to messenger, if I'm not mistaken.
But
right, that's correct.
And these dogs also had that kind of a similar function.
Yeah.
You know,
now
they could get to the underworld. That's what the word I was looking for.
Before you get to the river Styx and talk to the ferryman, the three-headed hound, I forget his name, Cerebus, Cerebus. That's it. Okay, now he guards the gates of hell, so no one can leave, and no one can enter. No one can enter if they don't belong there, and then that's the whole case. So that's where we get the hellhound idea. Now these are just massive Great Danes for the time.
Great Danes, or are they Doberman Pinschers?
No, the Doberman Pinscher really came from Egypt, and that was a modified dog. But these were bigger than that. These were bigger than the Great Danes. They were incredibly big. They
Let's go on my Pinterest. Thank you.
Were dark and ferocious, but that's where we get all that. Now, are they familiars? No, that's a different question. Cats can be familiars. Rats can be familiars. Dogs can be familiars. It depends how they're trained. Odin had crows or ravens, and he would send out the ravens
in memory.
Yeah, and they would see everything and report back to him. Now, the idea, the concept of that is that Odin was not omnipotent. He needed information. He needed info, and so he had these ravens do it all for him. So this is where we get the idea, the concept. Even the native Crow Indians, many of the Indians believe in ravens as, again, messengers or old spirits, demonic spirits, watching you to see if they can. Now, we found out through modern science that ravens and crows are very intelligent, and they remember faces, they remember who you are, they remember your scent of smell, and they can orchestrate attacks, amongst the flock to attack an enemy, like another bird or a human or anything like that they encounter. So they're very intelligent. They're just not birds, but they're very intelligent beings.
They can speak if you have one that you can actually, have it speak.
Yes,
right.
I have a friend that has a craven, and I guess it's a crow raven hybrid. And to say murder.
So.
There are different forms now. Just make a long story short here, there is something called the territor, and the territor is so large it can actually pick up children and small people, under 5 foot tall, I guess, or it depends on their weight. But there is a massive incident not very far on the other side of St. Louis where this territor flew down, and they call it the Piasa bird, PSI something, A, whatever, Piasa bird, and it could come down and with both of its talons pick up 2 Indian braves and then fly off. So these become the thunderbirds. And the reason why they're called the thunderbirds is because they can only fly, they can only glide from a high perch, or if there's a thunderstorm, they can use the updrafts and the wind of a thunderstorm to fly on with ease, because they're such a big bird and they need a lot of support. So we get all of this from Greek mythology, Nordic mythology, Indian mythology, of these elementals, these familiars, flying around abusing people, spying on people, robbing their souls. We call them the vampire bat in India. So it goes around the world. There's always some demonic presence. There's actually a god in India that has vampire fangs. And this is where we get a concept of vampirism. Didn't all come from Transylvania, but it really started probably in India, where the gods were cannibalistic. And that is, man, that's
Yeah,
where it
sure.
all.
I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
we've all seen pictures of the Dominion god Kali, right? And she'll have the head
Oh.
and the knife and the different arms holding different things.
Just words.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think there
Yeah.
are usually fangs attached as well. But I suppose I might be talking out my ass here, but I think there are two sides to that
It's like
particular god, where there's a good and pleasant side
Yes.
as well, and then there's this other
Right.
side,
dark light.
our aspect that
You
is
know, let's talk about good and bad. Is the raven or the crow is bad, but the white buffalo is good.
What do you mean it's bad? I love ravens, so
No, they're bad because they're
people
yeah.
just in general think that
just in
that's
general, mythology. But
Because
the
it's
but the
black.
but,
the
but the white,
white
yeah,
graceful buffalo, and maybe
Mhm.
that's
right,
just a dark and light thing.
right. The white buffalo was a sign, a good omen. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And in Arabic, a female camel is a good thing. So each civilization,
Jeff.
each civilization has omens that they rely on because of superstitions of what's good and what's bad, and this comes down through lineage.
What you're taught, basically. Yeah.
Right. Now, was it on your show? I guess it was. We were talking about chemtrails. I think we were talking about chemtrails.
Oh, we
Okay.
could mostly.
Yes.
Now,
was
in the Old Testament, they released, the extraterrestrials released a fog in the air
Mm.
to dumb people down so they would not be as intelligent. And we use that today as saying brain fog. I just can't think.
Man.
Come
I-
on.
Oh,
No,
God.
that's where we get the expression.
Where it came from. Good Lord. Oh, you are just like a wealth of knowledge. We love having you on.
You are.
You really
So-
This is friggin' unbelievable right there.
So-
I'll tell you. That just knocked me right off my chair.
So
It's awesome.
Holy cow.
it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You can't think today because some alien dumbed us down, 8,000 years ago. But that's the way it all comes from. Superstitions. Now everyone says today, "Oh, Mike, we're in the 21st century and we just don't believe in all that hocus pocus." Now talk to Michael Schumer. He doesn't believe God exists. He doesn't believe in angels. He doesn't believe in spirits. He does not believe in consciousness outside the body. And he gave a lecture at Oxford. No, yeah, I think it was Oxford. He gave a lecture, and I saw that lecture. It had 3 other professors that did not believe in God, and they gave us the reasons for it. And I said, what you're listing as God is space aliens, Michael, you idiot. Okay, you're listing space aliens and replacing the word God, which is a German word for a neutral form of spirit. So he doesn't even understand. He doesn't understand energy at all or the creator, and he teaches at a college.
Mm.
So with this mindset, I mean, it's not even Berkeley. I mean, my God, he's out in some podunk New England college. You know what I'm saying? And he still buys off the
Oh,
rack.
Doug, New England.
Hello. Do you know who you're talking to right now?
Rocks are being thrown.
So I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I tell you what, Michael, that's really sad, because when you don't do your homework and you go around preaching your idiocy to the rest of the planet, gee whiz, how come they haven't locked you up yet? From my side of the fence, he's crazy. Okay.
But from his side of the fence, you're crazy.
Yeah,
That's
whatever.
why we love talking to
Yeah. So
like a plethora
so
of
yeah, call me crazy. Call me crazy. But down the road, when you talk to your creator, guess what? He's going to say, you should listen to me. Hey, Dr. Lynch, you should listen to old
Right.
crazy Dr. Lynch. Because why?
Don't-
Okay, because why? We can only see less than 5% of our universe.
Yeah.
We only use,
I think actually.
parts of our brain.
3.7.
And that's the whole point, is that we are a species that has superstitions. We are afraid, but we fight for self-survival every day.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
science changes all the time, right? So
All the time.
You say that we can only see 5% of the universe. That just made me think of something I was watching about what is our new, not the Hubble, obviously it's James Webb.
James Webb.
Sorry. Just
James Webb.
James Webb is out there, and it's kind of thrown Big Bang, the theory of Big Bang, on its ear, because they're finding like stars that just shouldn't be there. They're newer and further out.
Yeah, because we live in a donut. Our universe.
There was one explosion.
Yeah.
Everything was put out there. It's changing science right now.
Why don't they listen to us? For like Chris and I always say, no,
In
that's
real
not
time.
what happened.
Yeah, we live in a donut. It is a big bicycle inner tube tire, and it's constantly expanding. And people look around and they go, "Oh, that just can't be. Oh, that just can't be." Well, again, the more we put in our lexicon, the more we put into our encyclopedia, the more bigger and broader horizon we can see. And if we don't study the paranormal, if we don't study Bigfoot or elementals or wood fairies or fairies or whatever, then we'll never expand our consciousness to really encompass anything. We know more about the moon and Mars than we know about our own oceans.
That's very true.
Right.
That's right.
And we don't know all that much about the moon. We don't know how it really got there.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, yeah.
So that's a
Metal munching moon mice.
Right.
Metal
Good
munching.
Rocky and Bull.
Yes. Rocky and Bullwinkle. Moose and squirrel.
Moose and squirrel.
Upsidasium.
Wolf and squirrel.
Moose and squirrel.
All right. That's our other moniker.
Oh,
Moose and
Yeah.
squirrel.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave.
oh,
Oh, okay, great. No,
I have to go to sleep. I appreciate your
Oh, no
time.
problem.
Right,
We actually
thank
got
Thank you
around.
very much.
I think
You guys are awesome.
overall,
Dr. Mike, it's
Mark
been
tomorrow.
a pleasure.
it's been a
I
pleasure.
know
Craig.
one of these days we'll have to go ahead and get you on our show too.
yes.
Oh yeah, just
Most
And
definitely. I'm
We
glad
could
you
all
got-
we could all come over to my place.
All
sure,
right.
absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I love it is kind of
I'm
like
so
having
glad you finally
fun,
get to meet
right?
each other. So it's great.
That's-
Yeah,
This is fantastic.
this has been a highlight of my year right
Yeah.
here.
It's a pleasure, and like I said, I like to talk to people who like to talk, because we don't get bogged down to some agenda,
Right.
and that is not what the paranormal is. The paranormal, again, is finding yourself in this world and communicating with your strengths and weaknesses. It's like any athlete, building upon the next step and the next step, and keep on going, and then we'll get this worked out.
Growing and growing.
But I tell you, a lot of people just don't get it, and we need to do this now. We need to do this now.
Absolutely. We agree.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of work to be done, that's for sure. And
But we have to wrap up as well because
Yeah. Okay.
gotta get up. And
Yeah.
I appreciate it,
I can
Kristen,
be there tomorrow too.
we
Dr. Mike.
appreciate
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Guys,
so much
I
again,
want to
Thank
thank
you.
both you guys for
You
taking
guys are awesome.
here.
This was
And
just really
we're
a fun
honored.
night.
We are just like
Yeah,
I'm
this
elated.
was-
I can't
Me too. It's like
believe we had
I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to sleep now.
Now, I throw this in. When you sleep, you are closer to death than at any other time during the day.
yeah, it's scary shit.
But your brain is 10 times more active while you're asleep than when you're awake.
Well, I have a chance then.
And then your dreams, your body reacts to the dreams the same as if you react to everyday life. The consciousness doesn't distinguish. And so So if you dream a dream and you say, "Oh, that's the realest dream I've ever dreamt," and it happened like this,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then that's cool because you were meant to dream that. There was a reason for every dream, and that's it's just the coolest thing in the world.
It is.
No one has ever discovered why we dream.
That's
Nope.
right. It's still a
That's-
mystery.
Yes.
And some of them are premonitory. You know, we've both had dreams where, yeah,
and
you know,
timeline
it might have
related
been
and
symbolism, but the same events occurred the next day. Some just seem like junk. Some I can never explain. I don't know. But science doesn't know why we do it either. You know we can die of sleep deprivation.
right.
It'll kill you eventually.
That's right. It will.
Fascinating thing to think about. Like,
I really need
really?
to do it.
I'll just die if I don't sleep, and it can
And
happen.
what's really amazing about all this is the fact that if you look over in the comment section,
Mhm.
look at all the people that are here tonight.
Absolutely.
All these wonderful people.
Yes.
Joshua
Um,
Dixon, Michelle Panic. I hope
You'd
I'm
be,
sorry.
you'd be
if I said
calling
that
out their names for 15 minutes.
I know,
Chris.
right?
You know.
I was having fun
Yeah,
staring at
sweet.
everybody earlier.
Good night, you guys. I'm
Greg's
gonna
got
leave.
Greg's got a fan club.
To put up, I
Greg's,
apologize.
Greg's got a fan club there. So
Yana,
Oh, it's not my
we got to
fault.
do this again. We just got to do it again.
Cameron,
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Love you guys.
everybody.
Love you guys too.
Hope you guys too.
You guys all have a good evening.
Love you.
Good
Good
night.
night, you
Good
guys.
night. Yeah.
Good night, Mike.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. We'll see you Saturday.